Good afternoon, everybody. This is Fred Nauer. I'm the Chief Flight Instructor at Thunderbird Aviation. I see we have a few more people signing on right now. Let's just wait a couple more minutes and then we'll get started with the introduction to the ForeFlight application. Okay, it looks like we have everybody signed in at the appropriate time here. So let's get started. So the first thing that you're going to see on your screen there is something that comes from the ForeFlight.com website. If you haven't joined, if you just downloaded the ForeFlight app on your iPad or your phone, you'll be able to use most of the stuff we're going to talk about today for 30 days. After that, you're going to have to buy into a plan. If you're a basic VFR person, then it would probably be best just to use the $99 a year Basic Plus. It gives you the flight planning app, International Flight Plan Filing, which is the way all things are done now on an ICAO flight plan. Get the graphical briefing from the from 1-800 Weather Brief, along with the aviation weather from that spot. All the aeronautical maps, both, it says both VFR and IFR, but that's because you get all the VFR sectional charts, all the VFR low and route charts, and all the IFR high and route charts, along with all the approach plates and SIDS and stars for the entire United States. I'll give you terrain obstacle data so that as you're flying, you can use that information to not hit stuff. Airport and FBO information, both from the ForeFlight database and from the airport. I'm sorry, chart supplement book. It used to be the airport facilities directory. The ability to do weight and balance of the aircraft, do a logbook if you want to, add your checklist, the airplanes that you're flying onto the system there. And it has various ways of connecting it to the avionics inside your airplane, printable nav log, passenger app. If you have other people in the airplane who want to follow along with what you're doing, this allows them to be able to use ForeFlight without having to pay for the whole thing. And not only internet traffic. So if you have hooked up to a Wi-Fi, they hook up to Flight Aware and to show you all the traffic that is in your area, or even to the place that, any place that you're looking at on the map. Now, as we go through the stuff today on my screen, when we look at the ForeFlight information that we'll be looking at today, I am in the middle version here, the $200 version, which gives you everything we just talked about, plus georeference approaches and charts. So if you're an IFR person, this becomes very, very important, because now the little airplane not only appears on the sectional chart or the en route charts like the basic one does, but if you pull up an instrument approach plate, a SID or a star, then your airplane will also appear on that approach plate where you are, so you can get an added piece of information about where you are when you're flying the approach. You can put those plates on your map, which I use a lot when I'm doing my instrument check rides at Thunderbird Aviation, to make sure that the student is flying the approach correctly, and then I can look at the sectional chart underneath and making sure we're not flying in any airspace we're not supposed to be in. Synthetic vision with glance mode allows you to be able to look at all that data, navigation and terrain data while you're flying. Hazard advisor and hazard alerts, it only works when the airplane is moving. Terrain profile, cloud documents, that means you can take extra documents that you put on into ForeFlight, pull them down from the cloud, and interactive icing and turbulence layers information along with all the other stuff. The $300 version over here has all sorts of neat stuff that is excellent if you're in a charter type operation, especially if you're flying aircraft that use jet fuel. The only thing that I can find over here that would be cool to have in one of these other ones would be this airport 3D picture that you get of that you can look at of the airports that you might be going to, and a 3D review of your flight after it's done. The rest of the stuff is all basically there to help out the charter type operation, so that you can turn ForeFlight into an electronic flight bag. Wait a second.
Hi, this is Char. I was just going to say, Kieran, you might want to mute your mic because we can hear stuff in your background. There you go.
So now I'm going to switch over to looking at stuff on my iPad. So the first thing is, there it is. In addition to ForeFlight, I have some other nice to have, not required to have applications that I've added to my iPad that help when I'm flying. The Weather Channel app that I have is just the regular one for looking at weather all over the United States. The nice thing about having something like that is that all the aviation weather is just the TAFs and all the stuff that lasts 24 to 30 hours in the future. The Weather Channel will give me a chance to look at the weather forecasts for days in the future. Yes, we all know that the farther out you go, the less accurate they become, but at least it gives you a general idea. I also have the E6B stuff from Sporty, excuse me. And the other one that's also nice to have is down here. And for my iPad, I had to use the one that's in the lower left-hand corner there called Solar Calc. On my phone, I have one that's called Sunset, I believe. And basically that one gives you sunrise and sunset times. Okay, disregard. Maybe Solar Calc is gone now. Anyway, so this is just some other pieces of other apps and stuff that I use. The ForeFlight version is like I said, gives you all the various kinds of charts. I'll tell you how to get to this stuff here in a bit, but right now I have the sectional chart up. But you can also get the IFR load chart, and that's for, like I said, the entire United States, including Hawaii and Alaska, and Guam. You can actually fly around the globe almost using just the charts that you can get from ForeFlight. Then, in addition to that, you also get the IFR high charts. If you are flying one of those aircraft and get up that high, we'll just stay in the sectional now for just a little while. The other thing you might want to do when you first get into ForeFlight is go to the document section on the lower bar there. It's the word documents there. Tap on that. There are documents in the ones that are in my documents file are the ones that come out of the catalog. If you look down the bottom of that stripe over there on the left-hand side, we have the FAA, ForeFlight, and Nav Canada document choices. You can go to the FAA Drive site and pull down all sorts of interesting information, other maps and charts and things that are all in various files. The ones that I've downloaded on mine, I put in my documents file, include the regulations that I use for my flight training, the Aeronautical Information Manual, the Aviation Instructor's Handbook, which if you're going for your CFI, that book just changed in July. All the other stuff, all the other handbooks that I use on a daily basis in my flight training. I downloaded the chart supplement book for that has the state of Minnesota in it, mainly because of the being able to use the legend in the front for all the information about what all the different words and abbreviations mean when you're looking at the chart supplement material that you can get as part of your ForeFlight operation. In addition, I've also done got the VFR chart legend and the IFR low chart legend. So if when I'm looking at those charts, if I find something that's new or different or something that's a fairly rare symbol that you don't get to see very much, I have the legends there so we can take a look at that. Some more rate 61 there. And the other one for you IFR guys is called the Digital Terminal Procedure Supplemental, which is like everything else in aviation, a highfalutin term that basically means the legend for the approach plate book. If you buy approach plate books, this is the first 15 pages with all the legend stuff in it, and the very last page on your approach plate book, which gives you the climb descent table for how fast you're going to be going if you're doing trying to convert feet per nautical mile into feet per minute, or if you're trying to file what kind of, figure out what kind of descent rate you have to do. If you're flying an ILS approach with a 3.5-degree glide slope instead of the normal 3-degree glide slope, this chart will help you with that. But it has all the legend information about everything that you're going to see on the approach plates, including all the abbreviations, so that you can use this to help you if you find something on the approach plates that's something that's new or different, something that you don't run into on an everyday basis. I have the ACS information for my flight training side, some more regulations, some of the other extra things that I just downloaded for reference. If you're in near big Class B airspaces, they have the fly charts that you can use to help you navigate the Class B airports. If you're ever up and down in Atlanta or down in New York. The other thing you want to download from the ForeFlight section is the Pilot's Guide to ForeFlight mobile applications. All the information that you need, and then most of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about today, I gleaned right out of this, this book right here. And the cool thing about everything that I'm talking about so far, all the FAA publications and this ForeFlight book, is that every time something changes in any of the publications, any of the regulations, or you get a new version of the ForeFlight mobile, an update, all this stuff automatically updates at the same time. So you can see the little green checks in all the corners of these things. That means they're all up to date. And I set this thing up to update automatically. So if you're hooked up to a Wi-Fi system and an update occurs, it'll automatically update the information for you, and I'll show you how to set that up in just a few minutes. All the stuff that I have in my outside doc folder is just information that I use during my flight training, extra handbooks and POHs and stuff for all the airplanes that I fly. But the thing about this one is, this is information that you put on here by yourself. So there's two ways of doing it. If you're in the $199 or the $200 version of ForeFlight, there's a cloud document system that you can use. But since I started my life with the basic $100 version, I just downloaded these myself onto ForeFlight, which worked out really, really well until I got a new iPad. And then all this stuff disappeared on the new iPad because it was stored on the iPad itself. So before ForeFlight came up with this cloud document thing in the $200 version, I found a application on Dropbox. If you have a Dropbox account for yourself, it's, for the amount of stuff that I use, the Dropbox stuff is free because I don't have that many documents in it. But if you go to the Dropbox application on your computer, you can add to Dropbox something called the ForeFlight app. What that does is creates a folder in the application folder in Dropbox, and you can put all the extra documents that you use but aren't updatable on any database that ForeFlight has, put them in the Dropbox, and then whenever you get a new iPad, you turn on, when you turn on the iPad looks for your Dropbox application, see if there's any documents in there that you don't have, and automatically puts them on your iPad. You then go to your application on your computer and update one of these documents here, or you delete one of the documents, the next time you turn on ForeFlight, it'll realize that that thing's been deleted and take it off from this screen. So there's two ways of doing the cloud documents. One is the one that I found and I've been using most of the time here is the Dropbox version. They're also, like I said, if you're in the $200 version of ForeFlight, you can use the cloud document version itself. So, you're brand new to ForeFlight. How do you set this thing up? So the first thing you would probably want to do if you have an airplane that you fly or a set of airplanes that you fly very often is go to the very, very bottom of the iPad here. You have the list of all the stuff. You go all the way over to the right-hand side of the screen on the bottom there. It has the More tab. You tap on the More tab and this screen comes up. The cool thing about the More tab is while you're flying, it has a little clock there on the bottom so they can use that to time your legs if you're flying cross country. You can use it to time your flight approaches. But the first thing you want to do when you're brand new to ForeFlight is set up your aircraft. So in the More system here, the third one down from the top on my screen is aircraft. You tap on that, and all the aircraft that I've put together over on the side here are already set up. To put in a new aircraft at the very, very top of that first column there, you see the plus. Just hit that plus there and then put in all the information that you want into the stuff over here on the side. This is where you put in all the information. So I've already put in 4015 Juliet, so we don't have to spend the time with me typing. I'll just talk you through what I had to do. So I hit the plus at the upper corner there, the upper side of that first column there. Then a blank form came up with all this asking for all this information. In order to be able to use all the ForeFlight information the best that you can, the first thing you want to do is put in the tail number, and always, always start the tail number with the letter N. Then it will look through the FAA database and see if it can find that tail number. And for some of the stuff, it'll automatically download into ForeFlight some of the information that is about that airplane. It'll know. Obviously, if you put it N4015 Juliet, it'll automatically put in the aircraft category and some of the other information that will automatically download it because you put in the full tail number. If you want to, then in the second row, you can type in the serial number if you want to do that. The aircraft type, I found I had to go and look for that myself. The list that you get for that, let me click on that with my finger, is in alphabetical order. And so all the Piper stuff is under P. So but this guy has a nice little search engine at the top there that you can type in the basic identification of the airplane, and it'll pull up all the information, all the airplanes that have that in there. You just pick the aircraft, like 4015 Juliet is a PA28-181 Archer 2. You just put a little check mark in the box, and then go back to the little, to go back at the very top of the aircraft type page here. It has a little arrow pointing to the left saying 4015 Juliet. That takes you back to the basic information about the airplane. Aircraft category, like I said, is usually put in automatically because you put in 4015 Juliet. Aircraft color is, just like the old FAA flight plans, just put in that just puts in the letters for the colors. The home airport, if the airplane always flies from the same spot, and then airspeed units. Performance profiles is being able to go in and type in, if it hasn't been pre-populated, the true airspeed that you usually use when you're climbing, the fuel flow for that, the climb rate that you use. The more information you put on this page, the better off the better the application will be able to use this information in your flight plan and be able to give you a more accurate fuel calculation for the entire flight plan that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Hitting the back button at the top there to go back to the profile, and then the 4015 Juliet at the top to go back to the basic information. So that was performance profiles. The glide performance, if you put that in there, I had to look this up in the POH. Best glide speed is obviously in there, but then you have to go to the, usually most airplanes have a chart with a graph on it that tells you if you're at this altitude, you're going to be able to glide this far. The problem is the chart is in feet of altitude and miles of distance. You have to adjust one of those so that the units is the same. So I usually just change the feet to miles and figure out what the gliding distance is at 6,000 feet MSL, or 6,000 feet AGL, excuse me, and type that into the, then do the math and come up with what the glide ratio is, and then just type in that number in the glide ratio box there. What this does is when the airplane is flying, if you decide to pull up the glide information that ForeFlight has on it, it puts a little ring around your airplane based on the winds that it senses at that moment and your speed at that moment, plus, I'm sorry, the speed that if you slow down to the best glide speed, how far you would be able to travel before the airplane would have to be on the ground. So it gives you a little bit of a hint or a help where if your engine quits, what's the best way to go. But it's based on the winds that are blowing on your airplane right at that moment. So if you turn the airplane around to face it into the wind, obviously the shape of the ring around your airplane is going to change a little bit because your ground speed is going to change. The altitudes are the default altitudes that you normally fly. This will be the place where it starts from and automatically puts that in to the calculation and uses that information for filing if you decide to go that far. The maximum ceiling of the airplane, the fuel type, the fuel units, and if your airplane has a specific piece of information in the POH that tells you how much fuel you use for start, taxi, and takeoff, you can put that in there too. You notice I left the FAA equipment blank because now all flight plan information is based on the ICAO flight plan. Now the cool thing about the ForeFlight system is you don't have to worry about where the information goes on the ICAO flight plan. ForeFlight puts it into the system automatically. But what you do have to do is figure out what to put in these areas here for ICAO equipment, ICAO surveillance, and the weight category. The bottom three down here are more for the bigger airplanes. But those three there, ICAO equipment, surveillance, and weight category, are something that is information that is new and different in the ICAO flight plan world. So let me switch over to my other computer and go to this Word document. So as you can see, the ICAO equipment that needs to be put in there is the first one you always have to do is, for most of us probably, is the letter S, because that says that you have standard ComNav approach aid equipment for the route that you're going to be flying. This information includes the VOR and the ILS. So if you'll notice, if you go to the official FAA.gov website and type in ICAO flight plan, you'll notice that there's the VOR and ILS choice under the equipment section. But since you put the S up there, you don't have to add those into the equipment letters underneath. If you have no radios in your airplane, then the letter is N. But for the other ones that are used by a lot of people is equipment B. If you have LPV approach capabilities, that's if you have WAAS in your airplane, or be able to contact a space-based augmentation system, which is what WAAS is, Wide Area Augmentation System. If you have DME, the letter is D. If you have a GPS system, just regular old GPS system, Global Navigation Satellite System, then you can dial that in, put that in there too. The surveillance information, the standard one that we most likely have is the letter C for transponder with mode C. The other one, if you don't have a transponder with mode C, you just have a mode A transponder, would be the letter A. But the extra thing that you have to add to in addition to the transponder is what now, especially flying in and out of the Twin Cities, is if you have an ADS-B system on board your airplane, which type of ADS-B system do you have? There's two types, the 1090 megahertz and the UAT. They're both just different frequency ranges that the ADS-B works on. So if you have a 1090 system and it's only ADS-B out, which means the information from that the ADS-B information collects about your position and your altitude is sent out to the ATC system to be used to help track your airplane. ADS-B out is now required everywhere where the transponder with mode C used to be required. So within 30 nautical miles of a Class B airport, inside and above a Class C airport, and anywhere above 10,000 feet MSL. If you have an ADS-B system that has an out and an in system, the in capability allows the information that is out there in the ADS-B world, like traffic and weather information, to be transferred through the ADS-B system to your iPad if you have ForeFlight on them and you're using a Stratus system. We'll talk more about that in a second. If you have a UAT type ADS-B system, then you have U1 or U2. So you'd have to pick which one of these four to add to the surveillance portion of the airplane information. The weight category is L, M, or H for light, medium, or high weight category. All the airplanes that we normally fly in will be L for light, which means the airplane weighs less than 7,000 kilograms. If the PBN information, if you have an RNAV attachment to your airplane of some type, if you have a GPS RNAV system, then you can put in a C2. If you have a WAAS system, you can put in S1. That'd be in the PBN column. 4015 Juliet didn't have that, so that's why there was nothing listed on that sheet there. So, hang on just a second. Need to go do a couple taps here. Get back to where we were. So that was ICAO equipment, surveillance equipment, weight category, all the, just figure out what those letters are from the ICAO world and just plug those into the system there. Then when you file using ForeFlight, all that stuff's automatically put on the flight plan form. The additional information that the ICAO flight plan needs is if you have life rafts on board your airplane, then you can tell it how many people can be in each life raft, what the color of the life raft is, and if you have what kind of emergency extra emergency stuff you have on board your airplane, like life jackets, emergency radios, or survival equipment. Once you're done with all that, then as you type all this stuff in, it's automatically saved, and then all the aircraft that you've set up will be listed over on the left side in the column, so that you can go in and pick whatever aircraft you want to use on that particular day. Takes a while to get some of this stuff done for all the typing that you have to do, but once you get it done, it's very easy to do all the other types of stuff that ForeFlight can do. Any questions on the stuff I've done so far? So that was the More tab on the bottom there to basically get the system set up. The other thing on the More tab is right above the aircraft is the weight and balance information. Sorry, I seem to have lost the weight and balance, but anyway, not to waste time here. So this is another thing that, like the airplane stuff, that you can get set up, and as you can see, it can be set up to be on the bottom corner there. But basically, if you set up the information in here by plugging in all the information in the setup version there, plugging in the type, the units, the where all the seats are and everything, the basic empty weight of the airplane. So you have to have your, the weight and balance document for your airplane out. The information out of the POH handy for that. And let me try one more thing here. So then, by going into your POH, looking in the weight and balance section for the graph at the end that gives you the envelope for the weight and balance, you plug in all those numbers down there in the bottom for forward CG limits, both and the aft CG limits. You can also add in there, a couple of different ones, because like the Piper World has that diagonal line up there in the top there. Once you plug all that stuff in, then in the graph right there in the middle at the top of the screen there, you'll get a weight and balance graph there. Then when you go to the load section, you can type in how much people weigh and where how much fuel you're taking and how much is in the baggage area. And it'll automatically calculate the weight and balance for you, so that you don't have to do the math. So then once you have all that stuff set up, then doing the route stuff is very, very easy. For example, so to do a route, you just, at the very, very top of the screen there, there's the FPL. That's for flight plan. You tap on that square up there, and the basic edit version of the flight plan appears. If you want to fly from Flying Cloud Airport, you put in the 4-letter identifier of the airport. And if it recognizes it, it puts a little oval around it. Then you put the 4-letter identifier of the second airport you want to fly. With the space bar, if it recognizes it, it puts a little oval around it. And draws a magenta line on your chart between the two airports. And then basically that's it's all you're done. Now, if you're using a different airplane, something else from your list over there on the left side of the nav log, there's that column. The very top one is the airplanes. And so you can go in and now all the airplanes that you've added in your aircraft section in the more section will appear there, and you can select whatever airplane that you decide you're going to be flying that particular day. If you're going to, the other nice thing about the system is if you're hooked up to a Wi-Fi, while you're doing this flight plan, it will show you the winds at the various altitudes. So you can try to use the altitude that gives you the best winds. Now, the trick with this part, unlike what you would be able to do if you were doing this all by hand, is figuring out by using the winds aloft information through the various points throughout your flight. Like on this flight here, we use Minneapolis, probably Alexandria, and Grand Forks wind information, winds aloft forecast information to help us determine what would be the best flight altitude to fly, and maybe changing altitudes as we fly along. The ForeFlight system takes all that information, throws it into an algorithm of some type, and gives you the average wind all along the entire route. So obviously, if we're flying from Flying Cloud to Fargo, we're heading west most of the time, that will be flying into a headwind. So you pick an altitude that would give you the best winds. So in that case, it would be 2,500 feet for now, just to pick a number. Then what that does is it uses that wind, and along the bottom of the flight plan here, it gives you the total distance for the flight plan that you've chosen at the speed that you've given it in the 4015 Juliet airplane information that you put in there. Gives you the estimated time en route. Once you start flying, the estimated time of arrival will appear in the next space there. Using the airplane information for 4015 Juliet, it'll say, okay, if you're going to fly for an hour and 58 minutes, you're going to use 20 gallons. And basically, you're at 2,500 feet. Again, the average is 4 knots of headwind. All this information appears in the flight plan as long as you're hooked up to the Wi-Fi. Once you get in the airplane, then all this information will disappear unless you have a way of connecting the end ADS-B in information to your ForeFlight system. All the airplanes that you can rent at Thunderbird Aviation have a transponder that comes from the company called Stratus. Stratus is the one that early on started working with ForeFlight to be able to provide ADS-B in information to the ForeFlight app. So Stratus also has various external boxes that you can buy, that some of them just give you the ADS-B in information. So all you're going to get is weather and traffic. Sometimes if the lower end versions only give you the weather information. Some of the high end versions not only give you the ADS-B in weather and the ADS-B in traffic around your airplane, but it will also have a GPS system inside the box that will then be able to be used by your ForeFlight system to position the airplane as you fly along, and give you this, and thus you'll be able to pull up all that weather information as you're flying along. If you don't have one of those, or don't want to spend the extra money for those things, or you're not flying with an airplane that has a Stratus system already in it that's giving you the ADS-B in information through it actually comes through a Wi-Fi signal right to your iPad or phone, then the next thing over on this lower level here is a little suitcase. In the ForeFlight world, that's called packing. You tap on that suitcase, It says, okay, you've just decided to fly from Flying Cloud to Fargo. What you can download for that flight is all the weather, airmets and SIGMETs and TFRs, temporary flight restrictions, inside a 50 nautical mile barrier around your route. It'll also give you the fuel prices. So if you decide you want to stop someplace cheap to get gas, it'll also download the fuel prices for you under a separate download, and the NOTAMs that are available for the area that you're flying in. But all these will be at the time that you do the download. So if you click the little download arrow next to the weather, airmets, SIGMETs, it's downloading all the weather at this very moment. So then 2 hours later, when you get to Fargo, the METAR that was in Fargo 2 hours ago will still be in your ForeFlight, but it will not be the most up-to-date information. It will be 2 hours old. But this is, the nice thing about this is if you don't have a way of getting the weather through the ADS-B system onto your ForeFlight app, then this is as good a way as any. The fuel prices, that's a ForeFlight thing. They love to, we at Thunderbird Aviation always send in our fuel prices every time they change. We have an automatic email that goes to the ForeFlight Corporation so that they go into their system and change the fuel price, so that for us anyway, you'll have the most accurate fuel price information. A lot of people will use that during their flight planning process to figure out what information, where they want to go in the Fargo area, depending on what the fuel price is. And then obviously tapping the third one downloads all the NOTAMs. But as long as you're already attached to a Wi-Fi or have the ADS-B in through a Stratus system inside your airplane, you would be able to gather all this information again while you're flying. The next thing along the bottom there is the star. That's if you use this same route all the time, especially if we're going to go into the exact way of putting stuff into the ForeFlight system to be able to make it more like a realistic VFR flight plan, and you're going to use this one all the time. If you tap that star, it becomes a favorite and is saved in the the ForeFlight system. You notice at the very top of the screen there, there's the very end of it says US VFR sectional, FPL, and a couple other symbols. The very last symbol is a star and a clock. The star is all the favorite routes that you've chosen, that you decided to save. And the clock says you also have a choice. Let me tap on that right now. So all the favorites that I've ever done and saved on here are all listed. And I can choose any of these favorites to use as a particular flight plan. It'll also do all the recent ones that I've done manually in the ForeFlight system. So, but if you, like I said, if you use this route a lot, tap the star and it gets loaded into the favorites at that top area there. The next symbol there is the send symbol, or the share symbol, I guess is a better way to say it in the Apple world. You can email this flight plan to somebody else. In the flight section, we'll go into that section in a little bit. That's where you'll go into file the flight plan. This is also where you go to access the logbook to be able to record the flight after you're done. It'll save it to a clipboard on your iPad or phone. You can share it with an FPL file. We'll talk about what that is in a little while. And you can, if you have a printer that is able to accept the Apple signal to it, you can actually print this information, a nav log, out on the printer. And then obviously if you want to share this information with other people in the airplane that have their own iPad or iPhone, then you'll send it to the passenger section down there at the bottom. Right now we're in the edit mode where you can type stuff in and add things to the system. You can clear the stuff in the edit mode by tapping the clear button, but that eliminates the whole thing. If you just want to get rid of part of it, you just tap on the symbol, as I turned into a ghost. If I just move this off the navlog area there, it will disappear. If not, you just let go and it comes right back. Once you get to Fargo and you decide it's time to come home, you hit the little double arrow thing there, and it just swaps things around. Now, you couldn't tell anything by looking at the screen there. It is switched because the whole list is, we only got two spots on this list right now. So that's the edit section. The next one is the nav log. This becomes a little bit more important while you're flying, and a little bit more important after we do the next section of the VFR flight plan that we're going to go through in a second. The last part is the profile, which all that stuff that you downloaded in the more section for the obstacles around the United States all appear in this on this screen here. And it gives you an idea based on the airspaces. So you notice over here on the left side of our screen, we have a blue shaft going up from Fargo. That's the Class D airport at Fargo. The TERSA information is above that. As we get closer and closer to Flying Cloud, we have the Class D airport at Flying Cloud plus the Class B airspace above that. So you can tell by looking at this what kind of airspace, what kind of B, C, or D airspace you might be flying through. It doesn't do the E or G stuff. But if you choose an altitude, let me tap onto the altitude and just slide it down. Oops, that's the wrong thing. Why is that not working? If you pick a lower altitude, then all the stuff on the ground starts to turn red and yellow, saying the red stuff is the stuff you're going to run into, and the yellow stuff is the stuff that you're going to be within 1,000 feet of. So this is another way of looking at the information as you're flying to make sure that the altitude you chose is going to keep you away from all the stuff on the ground. So that's the profile information. So we've been at this for almost an hour right now. So let's take a little break here, and I'll let me get some other stuff set up here, and then we'll be able to continue on. We'll continue on with the VFR flight plan. If you want to set it up like the old version where you got checkpoints and stuff that you have to fly, and it give you some variations on ways you can look at the screen in order to be able to figure out whether you're going to be able to see the checkpoint or not. And then after that, we'll go into the IFR world and figure out how to set up the flight plan if you're going to be flying IFR. So I'll be right back. Okay, so that was the very, very basics of setting up a VFR flight plan. The only other, so now it's time to go through some of the bells and whistles that you get with ForeFlight with the ForeFlight application, as some of the other stuff that you can view on the screen itself. One of the one that's helpful for VFR applications, I've switched our flight plan back to flying from Flying Cloud up to Fargo. You go up to the procedures section, and has all sorts of information that we're going to talk about when we talk about the IFR, getting set up for IFR. But the third one down is traffic pattern. You tap on that, it has all the runways that are available. And now with the wind, and it tells you at the bottom of the column there that the wind is calm. So you basically you can fly to any runway because there's no wind there today. If there was any wind, it would tell you next to the runway which one was the best runway for the wind position that day. So from the direction you're coming in, you decide that you're going to try to ask for and see if they'll give you runway 27. Now, obviously, with Fargo being a towered airport, you're going to fly whatever traffic pattern they tell you to fly. But if you're flying to an uncontrolled airport and you pick runway 27, then you can draw on the map which is the best way to enter this traffic pattern. Left traffic is default, right traffic is obviously there because it's a Class D airport and you could go either way. But if you decide to come in and do a teardrop entry, it'll draw the teardrop entry on the chart for you. If you're just going to do midfield crosswind and then fly into the runway, it'll draw that for you also. Do the same thing for right traffic. One of my students years ago would absolutely have loved to have this feature for flying into on airports that they'd never been to before. Because, and I was the same way when I first started flying way back last century, that sometimes it just gets a little bit confusing about exactly where do you need to fly in order to be able to enter the traffic pattern correctly for this particular runway. Once you decide which one is the best one that you want to do, then if you click the bottom there where it says add to route, when you close this, it puts it right on the map for you. How to enter the traffic pattern for runway 27 with a teardrop entry for right traffic. And it also throws it up there in the nav log at the top. If you decide you didn't want to do that, you just tap on it till it turns into a ghost, move it off the screen, and it just goes back to the regular situation that you had before. So now if we tap on the US, the upper left-hand corner of the screen, these are all the various things that you can add to the chart with ForeFlight. Let me take off the sectional for a second. The first one at the very top, the left-hand side of this two-column thing is what are you going to see on the chart. The aeronautical section puts basic aeronautical information that you would also see on the sectional chart, but it allows you to choose which ones that you want to see. So you notice when I tapped aeronautical, on the left side of the screen there was a whole bunch of symbols that appeared. The one at the very, very top is all the airports, color-coded just like a sectional chart to tell you what type of airport they are. And now the Class D and or B, C, and D airports, they actually give you the three-letter identifier. The closer you get zoom-wise to the other airports, you can start picking up that information too. And even you have it set up so you can even get the private airports on your chart. The second one is the various types of airspace available. So here around the Twin Cities area, we have the Class B airspace for flying cloud. Up around Fargo, we have the Tersa airspace around that, along with the Class D. It also has restricted areas and MOAs and such. The nice thing about this is that, especially with the, let's go back to the airport information, because I'm not flying, the letters of the airport are all exactly the same, but in the sectional chart, if you're heading south, all the information on the sectional chart will be, if you have track up, will be upside down, but the information that appears in this aeronautical section will always be set so that you'll be able to read it correctly on the screen. So no matter which direction you're flying, it'll always be left to right. So besides the airport and the airspace, the next one is airways. Both Victor Airways, since we're in the low part here, and the GPS low airways too, the ones that are color coded in blue. The next one down is the center boundaries, including, if you pull in close enough, the information about what frequency to use for the area that you might happen to be in for talking to center. The next one is terrain information, so it gives you a little bit more of a topographical information. And finally, getting close enough, all the major highway systems in the United States, so that you know where all the roads are. So the reason you can do all this, if you plug all this stuff in, is basically you have a sectional chart that will always be north up, no matter which way, or top of the screen up, no matter which way you're flying, you'll be able to read all this information without having to think about what it means if it's upside down. The sectional chart doesn't turn that way, this one does. So that's the aeronautical chart at the very top of our information there. The next one down is a street map. I suppose if you want to use this as for when you're driving around in your car. Although I did use this once when I first got ForeFlight, it was winter time and somebody wanted to do a flight to look at the Christmas lights from the sky. If anybody asks you to do that, talk them out of it. I went to the Minneapolis Star Tribune newspaper and went to their section that says, here's the best, what are the best lights in the Twin Cities area. And I went to this street map because they always had their addresses on it, figured out where the address was and did a flight plan for the best Christmas lights. But from the altitudes we were able to fly, because we were flying around the Class B airspace, you couldn't see anything. So that was the only reason I can think of for using the street map. The next one down below that is the aerial map, and this is the one that's best if you're doing VFR flight planning. You'll be able to tell whether the information that you're seeing on the sectional chart is what's it going to look like when you're actually, I got to shut off the sectional chart. What is it going to look like when you're flying over it? Some kids will pick like the edge of a city or something like that, but when you go to the aerial chart, you can't even tell that there's even a city there. Or they're picking a small town on the sectional chart, which is now, like Olivia, turned into a fairly big city. So it makes it a little bit easier for the VFR students to be able to make sure that what their checkpoints are going to look like before they go flying. It's a fairly decent resolution on this thing. You can get in fairly close and be able to see That's as close as you can get. See what's going on around your checkpoint, even to the point where you can see the shadows. So that's the aerial map. So then the next thing you can see, if you look very, very closely, you see that there's a square around aeronautical. That means it can come up all by with anything else. The street map and the aerial map are exclusive. You can't have both of them on at the same time, but you can have, and so then the same thing here, the VFR sectional can be brought up, but if you pick the IFR chart, the VFR sectional disappears. So inside that square, there's the sectional, the IFR low chart, and the IFR high chart. Those are all mutually exclusive. You can only pick one. The next thing down is the VFR flyways. Those can be, I believe, put on top of any of the other charts. We don't have any here in the state of Minnesota. I think it looks like the closest one is down here flying around Chicago. Being able to pick a route to fly so that you can traverse through the Class B airspace in a flying VFR. Still probably, I still have to talk to somebody, you still have to get clearance, but it gives you the route that you can fly around those airports. So over here in the upper right-hand corner, you see this little target symbol. You tap on that, where you're sitting at that, where your airplane is right at that very moment, goes to the very middle of the chart. The cool thing about that is, now you all know where I live. Just north of the big airport. So that blue dot is where I'm at right now. When you start flying, that blue dot will turn into whatever airplane you decided to choose as your airplane symbol. So then the right-hand side of this column here has all sorts of interesting other pieces of information that you can add to the ForeFlight world to see what you can use. We have to spread this one out a little bit. Radar composite is the combining all the radar signals, the radar returns from precipitation at all levels in the atmosphere. When you're flying, if you have ADS-B in your airplane, this is the information you could get while you're flying. Now the resolution is not as good as it is here, and they always tell you that all the information you're getting through this system, any system that's not it's not radar that's attached to your airplane. Any of these things can be up to 30 minutes old. So you're not supposed to use this to fly around thunderstorms. You're just supposed to use this to avoid the thunderstorms at all in the first place. But the composite gives you all levels. The lowest tilt gives you the information about the precipitation at the lowest level of the radar return. So this is the one that I use basically when I'm planning to figure out where the worst weather might be that's closer to the altitudes that I may be flying. Let me get rid of the flight plan there for a second so we can see a bit more of the map there. Again, these are all in the same huge rectangle, so they're mutually exclusive. You can't have them all there at the same time. This is satellite information, which never has made a whole lot of sense to me. The color one is a little bit better if you know what you're looking for to figure out where the what the different colors mean as far as the heights of the clouds, areas of icing, and it'll tell you over on the side there. You can choose what altitude you're looking at. So obviously the icing here is not till you get up to a fairly high level, but it's better for the winter time. Again, different shades for the different types of turbulence. Again, depending on what altitude you're flying. basic information on surface analysis. Where are the fronts? Where are the highs and lows? So it looks just like a surface analysis chart, but it puts that information right over the top of your sectional chart. The hazard advisor is something that comes up and tells you if you're about to fly into anything on the ground, but you got to be moving through the air to make it work. So that's why I got this little warning down here in the lower right-hand corner. It says it's disabled till you're greater than, if you're less than 30 knots. So that it does, you know, so it won't give you all sorts of hazards and stuff while you're just taxiing around on your airport. The traffic then, if you're hooked up to a Wi-Fi system on the ground, goes into the flight aware system and gives you all the stuff that's not been blocked by on flight aware. So you can go up to the place you're going to, get a general idea. Let me let my screen catch up here. General idea of what the traffic is like around the airport that you're flying. If you have ADS-B in your airplane, this will be replaced while you're flying with the actual, anybody who has ADS-B out in their airplane will appear on your screen. If you're anywhere near an airport that has the terminal information service, which is basically taking all the transponder information and transmitting it out, the ForeFlight system can receive that information and will also display that on your screen too. For all you CAP people out there, you got grid systems out there for helping with your search and rescue. Let's get rid of this traffic here. Oh, and the grid. The AirMets and SIGMET information. Let it catch up with the information across the bottom, asking for all the different types that you may want to include on your map. So the convective SIGMETs, areas where thunderstorms are yellow and red. The red ones are where the thunderstorms are at the moment. Where the areas of IFR are. And this is the same information you would get off the AirMets and SIGMETs. It's just that you don't have to interpret where all the corners are. It draws the information for you right out on your screen. Once you tap on it, it gives you the raw data information about that particular area of whatever you're looking at there. Where the level of icing is, what kind of icing it is, all that type of thing. So you can tap all four of these and get all the types of convective SIGMETs and all the other AirMets and SIGMETs that may be out there for you to be able to use for your planning information. Mutually exclusive though, oops, you can get both of these. The next one down is temporary flight restrictions. The cool thing about this is all the permanent TFRs are out there. Like this one up here next to Grand Forks Air Force Base is where they do the training for the drone pilots. And let me see if it's here. That must be the weekend. There's usually one around Hibbing because that's the open air iron pit mine up there still. And there may be a temporary flight restriction out there telling you that they're about to blast another wall out on the at the iron mine. So stay away from there because there's going to be debris flying all over the place. But the other nice thing is, you got to catch up. If ForeFlight has gone into all the major league. All the major sports teams, all those areas, all those places that have stadiums with more than 30,000 people in, that can have more than 30,000 people in them, and figures out when the sporting event is going to be happening there. And if the circle around that stadium is red, that means the TFR is active at this moment. If it's yellow, that means the TFR is probably going to activate sometime during that day. If you tap on the TFR, it'll tell you what's going on. This is the only place you can get that. ForeFlight is the only company that I know of that spent the time to be able to figure out when the sporting TFRs are going to be active or not. Next area down there is information about the particular airports. You tap on flight category, then it sets up color coding. That are set up under the old weather systems that used to be disseminated in the Outlook version of the area forecast. But the area forecast has gone the way of the dinosaurs, but the most of the navigation system people have gleaned onto the weather categories from that and have used that to color code the airport so you can tell what the weather is at a glance. If the airport's colored green, that means that the airport is weatherman VFR. That means that the visibility is greater than 5 miles and the ceiling is greater than 3,000 feet. So it is really, really, really VFR as far as the pilot rules are concerned. The blue dots are marginal VFR to the weatherman. That is ceilings that are 1,000 to 3,000 and visibility 3 to 5 miles. So as these weather starts to come in a little bit, it may still be VFR, and depending on your personal weather minimums, you may still be able to fly VFR to those airports. The next one down then is the red color, and that's IFR. IFR is ceilings from 500 to 1,000 feet, and visibility is 1 to 3 miles. Now, let me spread out here and see if I can find one. And then way down here, if the airport is, wait for it, the airport's colored pink, that's low IFR. The ceiling is below 500 feet and the visibility is less than a mile. So again, a nice quick glance of being able to tell you what the weather's like. So that's the flight category. The next one down is surface winds, exactly the same thing, except now it sets it up like the old flag system on the, but this is the winds at the surface. So V for variable, the dot means it's calm. The little flag thing is, if you see the flag at half mast like that, problem is they don't get any bigger than what we're looking at right now. You see the flag at half mast, that means that the wind is 5 knots. If you see the flag at the top of the flagpole, that means 10 knots. Let me see if I can find a spot where there's windy. Like down here. Right there in sort of the middle of the lower part of the screen there, we got an airport that the winds that are 10 knots. So every flag is 10 knots, and every half flag is 5 knots. And if it gets to 50 knots, then you'll see a little pendant there. But it's just not a very windy day here in the United States. Same thing for the winds aloft. You get to choose your altitude. And now you can start seeing the various flags show up. Down here in the lower right-hand corner, we got the 50 knots winds. There's 40 knot winds right next to that. Just above that, we got 25 and 30 knot winds. So as you can see, the windier it is, the more flags you see on the flagpole. And then you can choose your altitude over on the side there. Give you a glance of what the winds aloft are. Temperature dew point spread. The closer the temperature and dew point are, that changes colors to let you know that there's a possibility of thunderstorms in that area. The temperature in degrees Celsius. The visibility using the same color coding as the dots, except now it's just for the visibility. And same thing for the ceiling. So most of the time, if I'm going to use any of the stuff over here on the side here, I'm going to use the flight category so I can get a quick glance of what the weather is doing at the airports that I'm flying around or near. If I'm flying, I'll have the radar on, but again, it'll only be the composite radar, especially if I know that there's going to be rain in the area. I want to use that to try to avoid the rain as much as possible. And then I usually, when I'm VFR, fly with a VFR sectional. So that's all the information that's available to us under that side thing there. Let's go back to our route. Let me get rid of some of these dots here so we can. So now, if you want to be like using checkpoints and stuff along your route of flight, the easiest way to do that is along your route when you find something that is you feel is visible enough, like the island there above the word lake in Lake Minnetonka, you tap and hold on the screen and that circle appears. When you let go, it'll give you information on all the stuff, all the points like airports, navigation points, or any other waypoints that may be available near that spot. But if you want to use that spot exactly, then you tap the latitude and longitude at the top of the screen. Now, this is a flight or a route that you're going to do very often, and you want to make sure that you use the same spot every time. Let me show you on the next one. So now you're going to fly up and you fly right over the top of the town of Delano. That same thing appears, but now, I've done this already, but we'll do it again. On the more thing, it gives you insert to the route, which is the same thing as tapping on the latitude and longitude. But if you tap the word save, you can type in a name, and down here in the bottom, you can use it to type a description. And then when you hit save, that waypoint becomes named. And then if you look on when you're looking at your information there, you can, under the waypoint section, it will show you all the waypoints that you've created so that you could then set this up as your own, you could choose that point right from that very list. Again, if you are trying to figure out exactly what it's going to look like, and you want to choose waypoints based on what it actually looks outside the airplane, same thing, tap and hold to get the circle. But now that you know it's going to be somewhere between Deer Lake and that other lake there, tap the point. And then you can do that all the way along. Then the cool thing about this stuff is every time you do that, it sets that information up in the nav log itself. Now, why that Delano point didn't get in there, I'm not sure. That's how we selected that. You can then move the points around as you in your flight plan there by just tapping and holding instead of swiping them off the side. You can then move them around anywhere inside the flight plan that you want. Once you're done putting the flight plan together, you tap the send button, tap flights, then this screen comes up. You can look at a nav log, the kind that you can print, to see how, so that it looks basically the same thing like the nav log you used to make by hand. But the other nice thing about this is that if you hit the briefing tab, so says retrieving briefing, this is actually going into 1-800 weather brief and gathering all the same information that you would get from a phone call to 1-800 weather brief. Because you've already attached a tail number and it knows who you are because you're signed into ForeFlight. It's all the information that 1-800 weather brief requires is already in the system, and it sends that information there. So now you've gotten an official weather brief for your route of flight. So it gives you the exact same information that you would get from a weather brief, the NOTAMs for where you're departing from, any convective SIGMETs along your way, any IFR SIGMETs, a synopsis of the weather, the METARs along your route. If you just move up the screen here, it gives you the actual raw data information for the METARs. But again, the airports within 50 nautical miles of your route are color coded, just like on the just like we talked about earlier. Next is any PIREPs that have already been given along the way, cloud coverage, surface winds, terminal aerodrome forecasts that exist along your route of flight, the wind at the altitude you've chosen, and a winds aloft table looking at it from the side. Any NOTAMs along your route of flight? And now you've gotten a regular weather briefing. You can either look at it or not, it's up to you. But now, if there's any question about whether 4015 Juliet got a weather briefing for the flight that they were doing that day, that information is in the system. So we hit the back button here, we go back to the regular thing. And then down here in the lower right-hand corner, let's proceed to file. When you tap that, it'll ask you for any information that you may not have put in there yet. And then you tap file and it goes into the system. This will work the same way whether it's a VFR flight plan or an IFR flight plan. So you can get to that either through the send to button at the top there in the nav log section, or if your nav log section is closed, pushing the flights tab on the bottom of the screen does exactly the same thing. It'll save all the flights that you've done in the past. So if you, again, want to file something exactly the same way as you did before, you can tap on one of the other ones on the side, update the date and time, and file it from there also. Let me get rid of all the VFR stuff we were playing with there and go to the IFR chart. You can do this the old-fashioned way by just drawing the straight line between the two airports and then looking at the IFR load chart and figuring out what routes you want to fly in order to be able to go IFR between Flying Cloud and Fargo. One way to plan it then is grab the, like you're going to create a waypoint, but then it's called rubber banding, moving it down to a spot and say, yep, I want to go to Johnny intersection, and it draws the line there. Then you notice from Johnny intersection, if you pick up Victor 171, you can catch that at the Litchfield and keep on it and go all the way up to Alexandria, then pick up Victor 2 and fly that to Fargo, and then go to the airport. So rather than doing the rubber band thing, because the Victor Airways don't work very well that way, you can go back to the flight plan now and tap the Jonah intersection and tap insert after Jonah. And the cool thing about ForeFlight is you type in Victor 171 insert, it automatically picks the Victor 17 route and figures out the best way to the closest point on Victor 171 to take you to Fargo. But we decided we wanted to stop, we wanted to get off Victor 171 at Alexandria and continue on to Victor 2. So tap on the Victor 171, insert after Victor 171, AXN, insert, and now it goes directly from Alexandria to Fargo. Tap on AXN, insert after that, Victor 2, insert, and now we got Victor to Weirda. Now we want to go all the way to Fargo, so tap Victor 2 again and type in FAR, insert, and now we have the route exactly the way we want it. So the cool thing about ForeFlight for you IFR people is you can type in the Victor Airways along your route, where you're getting on the route, where you're getting off the route, what route you're flying after that. It gets your where you're coming from and your destination. So now when we go to the flight section and proceed to brief, whoops, what happened here? Stand by. Somehow this one didn't, oh, because first thing we have to do is go to flights that way. Yeah, sorry. So in order to be able to be accepted in there, you got to go to the flight section up there. Once it's in the system, then it'll be there. We can either get a nav log, a flight briefing. When we proceed to file this time, now the route of flight is Jonah, Victor 171 to Alexandria, Victor 2 to Fargo. Just like they want you to put on the ICAO flight plan, which is exactly the way it was on the old FAA flight plan too. But now you know the exact way, the exact method of putting the information into the route section is already done for you. So that was the way ForeFlight had you do it when it first came out. Then they got smart. You tap the route section over here on the right-hand side of the navlog section. It gives you all the ATC cleared routes that have been disseminated in the last, I think it's like 2 weeks. As you can see, the Jonah Victor 171 Alexandria Victor 2 Fargo is in here. But also a direct route. Somebody has actually gotten cleared direct. It's very, very nice. You can look at the bottom of all these and see that it says piston airplane. So you can actually tell that this is something that you're probably going to be able to fly. But be very careful. This one down here at the bottom is at 14,000 feet. So you don't want to pick that one because unless you want to use that route, but then change the altitude. So it does have your ability to just use what ATC has filed before. But once you file this, either way you decide which route you're going to fly, whether you make up your own by drawing it like we did, or picking one of these here from the route advisor. Once you filed it, since ForeFlight knows your email address, once it's accepted by ATC, you'll get an email saying, here's the route you're going to get from ATC. So if you picked a route and ATC gives you something different, you're going to know what it is before you walk out to the airplane, and you'll be, so that you won't be surprised when you say, I got an IFR flight to Fargo and the tower starts giving you some sort of weird route, and they don't say cleared as filed, they say cleared via, and you go, oh crap, now I gotta start writing all this stuff down because it's not what I thought it was gonna be. ForeFlight will be nice enough to you to send you the route that you're gonna get from ATC. If you choose one of these that's on this list here, chances are you're probably going to get it because it's already been used before. Even the ones where they have arrival routes and departure routes already in the system here. Like this one down here, Alexandria 171 to the Star arrival to Victor 510 to WAGNI. Those have been given before. It also gives you how many times it's been people have been cleared on that route. So you probably want to pick the one that's best for your flight, that has been given the most. And back to the procedure button. If they tell you in your routing that you're going to fly the Darwin 8 departure, then you can tap and go to the procedure section and go, let me back up here. Go to the procedure section, click on departures, gives you all the departures out of Flying Cloud Airport. You know that they're going to give you the Darwin 8, tap on that. And you're not going to do the Aberdeen transition, so you're going to do no transition, and there you are. Now it'll give you the Darwin 8 departure. Now, they may or may not give you this one, but it basically got to go to Minneapolis VOR and then fly outbound to Darwin. Same thing if we go back to the approach section. Whoops. Oh, I'm sorry. Fargo must not have any arrivals, so it's not there. But so now you can go to the approach section and say, okay, they're going to tell you that today, again, you got the winds down there at the bottom, so you can choose, oh, that's probably going to be ILS 36. So on your chart, if you have this system of it, if you've got the $200 version, you'll get the chart right on the map, and it'll draw the line for your flight from Fargo out to Day F, fly the ARC, fly the ILS inbound, and land. And if you have to, go to Kinney for the hull. And it'll draw that information right on the, whoops, ILS 36, and then choose where you're going to come from, the day of, and add the route, and then it just draws the picture right on your map. Along with, if you have the $200 version, the approach plate right underneath you. Get rid of the flight plan here. So what I've used when I'm flying around with my students is I have the sectional on underneath it so I can keep track of where we are VFR-wise while the kid is under the hood flying the approach. I usually don't put the route on there. I just have the approach plate underneath looking at it. You can see it's kind of faded right now. If you tap on the screen, down at the very, very bottom here, you have a little slider. You slide that all the way over, it makes the approach plate totally opaque, so you can't see through it. The more you slide it to the left, the more opaque it becomes, so you can see what the information is on the chart underneath it. Like I said, I use this mostly for when I'm flying with students to be able to see what airspace I'm flying around in while they're flying the approach. Once you're done with it, you tap hide the plate goes away. Traffic pattern we talked about already. The search and rescue stuff is for the grids that you can set up if you're a CAP person, to be able to give it a location where you're going to, and it'll be able to set up a search grid exactly what you're looking for. So that's all these stuff on the upper part. Down on the bottom here, under airports, you can either type in the airport you're looking for at the top, and then all the information about that airport will appear over on the side there. The basic, the best information that you need will be right there at the top, including most of the frequencies and everything that you need. The 3D view selection that you see there in the upper left-hand corner of those squares is available if you've paid for the $300 version. But information about the FBOs at the airport, information about taxiways, although there's a better way to get that one, comments that people have put in ForeFlight about the airport, type of weather that's there right now, and information about the airport itself. The info down here gives you some of that same information, including the frequencies that you would need for flying around. Weather information, starting with at the very top, the METAR for that airport, color coded just like everything else, with a D code underneath it, just in case you can't, if you're not used to yet, or are finding something in the METAR that's a little different. The TAF, and you can either tell it to give you the information in this bottom part here based on local time or Zulu, but using local time is usually a little bit easier. And it gives you time based on where you are right now, not where the airport is. Let me see if I wrote this down somewhere, hang on. I thought I wrote it down. The MOS is a grid forecast. So for airports that don't have a TAF nearby, they sometimes will have, the ForeFlight will throw in this MOS grid forecast so that you can get a general idea about the weather, the forecast, the weather that's going to be usually within the next, this one goes out a little bit farther than 24 hours, all the way to 10 o'clock Tuesday. In this case for today. But the nice thing about this is it's a two-edged sword here. It's extra information that you can use, but it's not official aviation weather, so that but what I use this for is if the TAF says the weather's good, but the MOS says the weather's bad, then for the IFR stuff, I'll use the MOS information to decide whether I need to declare an alternate or not. And the other way around, if the MOS says the weather's good, but the TAF says the weather's going to be bad, I'll always err to the side of the worst forecast. Again, the winds aloft. The information here is for right above the airport, and again, there's an algorithm that I think they use so that, especially if you come here to Flying Cloud, let me tap one of my favorite airports. This information here probably has a lot of the weather information for the Minneapolis, from the Minneapolis winds aloft forecast, probably a little bit from La Crosse, a little bit from Alexandria, not very much from Duluth or Grand Forks, but it combines all that stuff in there. So you notice that the winds that you see here are not exactly the same of the winds that you're going to see on the winds aloft forecast. It is just another way of presenting it. It's as good a guess as anything. Again, most of the time the winds here are a little more accurate. Instead of being, the winds aloft forecast just gives you the direction in even tens of degrees. But down here, this one gives it to you down to the individual degree. So most of my students use this because it tends to be a little bit more accurate, giving you a little bit of information. And if you want to be real anal about this, then you can look at the winds all the way along your route of flight, pulling up the airports all the way along there and seeing if the winds are going to change or how the winds change as you move along. Next one is the runway information. Let's go back to Flying Cloud. Runway information. All the NOTAMs that are at that airport will be listed here and letting you know which runways are open, which ones are closed. And at an airport that is towered, if you're going to 10 right, it's probably going to be right traffic. It doesn't mean they won't give you left traffic for 10 right, but chances are it'll be right traffic for runway 10 right and left traffic for 28 left. Information about what kind of lighting it has, where the touchdown zone is, various approaches to the runways. And you can tap each individual one. Again, no wind information here, so it's not picking which runway was most likely going to be the best. But if there is wind, like at Los Angeles, it'll tell you which runway is best for the wind that's blowing at that point for the latest METAR. Now, by the time you get there, it may or may not still be the best wind, but at least that's the way it is right now. But it also, over in the grid here, gives you what the crosswind's going to be. This is where I go to pull up instrument approaches. Just go to the airport that you're flying to and tap the procedures tab, then all the approaches. If you have the approach tab selected on this section here, you can get all the arrival routes into that airport if there are any, all the departures out of that airport if there are any, and any airport diagrams. The cool thing about this is you can either send it to the map if you have that capability in your ForeFlight, but if you just tap on it, it appears in the plate section, which is the next tab, the third tab on the bottom there. Now you can tell I've flown out of Flying Cloud Airport for a while because this was the last NOTAM that they had. Runway 10 left, 28 right is closed, and all the taxiways that connect that runway to Alpha were also closed. So I just, now up here at the top there, tap the little pencil and you can change the size of your line, change the color of your line, figure out whether it's going to be totally opaque or like highlighting, you'll be able to see through it, how thick you want the line. And then once you're done with that, you move your finger along the chart and it draws the line for you. You can use this to do the ATIS information, if that's the way you want to do it. There's another thing that you can use, but that way the ATIS information is right here on the screen itself. Whoops, why did it just flip over there? That's a good question. Once you're done with all that, you want to just clear the last few things that you've done. Or if you tap clear and tap clear annotations, the whole thing gets erased. Everything that you wrote on there goes away. They even have a simplified diagram up there at the top, but that usually doesn't have all the information you need in order to be able to taxi there. And if you have the airport diagram up and have the $200 version, your little airplane will appear on this chart as you taxi around so that hopefully you won't get lost. The other cool thing that ForeFlight does is when you're approaching a runway, for example, if you're taking off out of Thunderbird, which is right here by this FBO ramp, and you're going to runway 28, then you're going to cross runway 18. As you get close to the hold short line for runway 18, ForeFlight will put a symbol on the screen, and if you have the volume turned up, it will talk to you saying you're approaching runway 18. When you've crossed the hold short line, it will give you a different symbol, and the voice will say, now you're on runway 18. You got Siri talking to you, and if you have headsets that have Bluetooth attachments to it, you can hook ForeFlight up to your headsets, and you actually hear all this stuff in your headsets while you're taxiing around. I tend not to do that, even though I could, because it tends to be a little bit too much information sometimes. But the nice thing about it is that, and if you have your phone with you, then as you're taxiing along the phone, because it depends if you have your vibration turned on, the phone will actually vibrate. So if you got your phone in your hand or on the clipboard on your knee, the phone will vibrate, and it'll vibrate on your leg, and so you can look down and see what the information is that the ForeFlight is trying to tell you. The iPads don't have the vibration system in it, so you don't get that. But you do get the indication on the screen when you're getting near one of the runways. Documents we talked about. Imagery is just all the weather charts in one spot. Again, something you use if you're hooked up to Wi-Fi and you want to use this for pre-flight planning. Flights we talked about. Now, if you know, the scratch pad is the exact same thing. It does have, ForeFlight does have preset scratch pads available. One of them is for ATIS. Since you're on the scratch pad, the pencil automatically appears because they figure you're on the scratch pad because you want to write stuff. So then you write in the airport, the information and what time they tell you. Write down the wind, and if you want to, it gives you room to put in all the clouds. And I figure if there's more than 3 layers, then you don't really need to know about it anyway. Temperature, dew point, altimeter, and any other, and the, you know, so them looking at all this information, you can figure out or use this box at the bottom for when they clear you for the runway that you're flying on. The cool thing about that is that information stays there until you clear the scratch pad. For you IFR types, there's the CRAFT scratch pad for the IFR clearance, cleared as filed. So that's the C and the R. Climb and maintain 3,000 feet, expect 4,000 feet 10 minutes after departure is the altitude. What frequency you're going to talk to immediately after takeoff, and what your transponder code is. Or you can just choose a blank one and write your own information on there. The only problem with this is that if you're in something else, you got to hit the scratch pad, then hit this, and you know, so yeah, for the ATIS it's probably easy because you know you're going to turn the frequency on and listen to the ATIS and get this stuff ready. For your CRAFT thing, that's pretty well too. But I find if I have the plates up and available, even though I don't, the plate will always be there because you get that information even with the $100 version of ForeFlight. You just don't get the airplane taxiing along on the screen. But if you get the pencil up, you can write information on the screen itself and get your ATIS information there, and then your clearance to the runway. So that's the scratch pad stuff. You can choose the checklist thing is if you want to do that. I'm more of a it's got to be in my hand kind of guy, but the checklist then will you can choose which one you want to do. This is for 508 Quebec, and this is just a basic Cessna checklist because you told it was a Cessna 172. It gives you the basic checklist. You can go in and modify this as much as you want. Create your own checklist if you're so inclined. But again, that one's going to be a lot more typing. But if you're using the checklist, if you're done with it, you just hit the word check, and it automatically moves on to the next one. If you don't want to do that part right now, you can skip that, and it gives it a different color. And just like everything else in ForeFlight, it does have a version where it'll actually read the checklist to you. But again, that's better if you have it hooked up to your headset. This was not hooked up to, I can share the screen, I can't share the sound, but if you do have that capability, the thing will read the checklist to you. And when you hit reset, everything goes back to not done. But I'm still, oops, I'm still old school enough to just use the regular checklist. Weight and balance stuff we talked about before. And what are we doing here? One more thing and then we'll be done. Track logs is something that happens when you start flying. You can set this up so it doesn't do this, but if you don't go in and shut this down, it automatically records every flight that you've done. And you can go in here and delete these after a while, or almost immediately if you want to. But it basically takes the airport you've come from and the airport you land at and shows everywhere you went in between, including the altitudes that you flew in the blue at the bottom there, and the speeds that you were flying along that route in the green line. And you can then take those routes, turn them into an FPL file, which is the type of file that Google Earth accepts. Then you can take that flight information that you had in the track logs there. You know, so weight and balance disappeared, now track logs is at the bottom. So whatever thing you looked at in the more most recently will be set right next to the more section there. So you can take the track log, turn it into an FPL file. I've already done that, so we don't have to worry about taking the time to do this. Let me share my screen, get off of ForeFlight here, go to Google Earth Pro and share that. And now what you're seeing on your screen is one of my flights that I took with a student where we did a couple of landings at Buffalo. Because it's Google Earth, it gives you the Google Earth satellite view of what's going on, and you can move this around for where you're looking at it, and it gives you the altitudes that you've flown. So as you start down, after you beam the end of the runway, you start down and get 45 degrees off the end of the runway, continue your descent, and then continue down on base, and then, oops, not too far. Gets lower and lower and lower, and you can move in on this stuff and move the map around so you can see exactly what you did and landed. And then all this stuff then obviously keeps tracking you while you're on the ground for all the taxiing that you've done. So the FBL file will be over here. You just you save that file to your desktop. When you open up Google Earth, then you just look for that file and it automatically puts it on the screen there for you. And then you can put as many up here as you want. And so here we have the one that I had plus the other one that is just so from a, so some people love to see stuff like this because it shows how well you flew the ILS if you're flying instrument approaches. It looks at information so that you can are able to determine how well you flew your route on a particular day, or from a flight instructor standpoint, how well the student did on the whether it was an instrument flight or a VFR flight, how well you flew. Now, most of the time, what I'll use is the, there's also a breadcrumb thing that you can use on ForeFlight, which will track your route and will stay on your screen for about 15 minutes before 15 minutes to 4 hours, depending on which one you choose. And so I'll use that one more than I'll use this Google Earth one because this one just takes a while most of the time to get set up. So, questions, comments, concerns? Okay, well, that's all I have for today. Thank everybody for coming. You should be getting an email from the company. It gives you an offer to fly with me or get a one-on-one session with me to continue your look at ForeFlight. And our, you know, the flight part is it would be nice if you're able to then fly one of our airplanes and see what the Strata system looks like when it's sending information to the ForeFlight itself, and what the system can do for you while you're flying around. So if there are no questions, and that's all we have. Thank you very much for coming today.